Okay, so I think we will get started, and people can come in and join. So welcome everyone for Learning Design Special Interest Group first webinar for 2025. It is doing scholarship of teaching and learning as a third space professional. Usually, so there are a few announcements that I will have, but let me first acknowledge the traditional owner of the land where we meet. So on behalf of ASCII Learning Design Special Interest Group, we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. We pay our respects to elder past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here today and who will be watching the recording later. I have some announcement around what we are going to do this year as a special interest group. So Learning Design Special Interest Group, we have 4 leads. Names you can see on the screen. Of course, we are all busy professionals, so sometimes we all can join. And unfortunately today, Leanne and Kate will be joining only halfway through, and Keith is busy with some other academic engagement. But on behalf of all of us, just I want to welcome. You can see the QR code on the screen, which is our LinkedIn group. Now, ASCII has the teen space, but it wasn't working very well. So we have the LinkedIn group where people can join, be part of it, regardless to whether you are part of ASCII, like paid member of ASCII or not. And then you can engage with this community. In 2025, we will be running a couple of different programs. This year onwards, we, as a leadership team for ASCII Special Interest Group, we started with research mentoring program. So we are part of a community mentoring program that's run by ASCII, and we are kind of a special branch of it, if you can, want to see it that way. An expression of interest was invited, and now we have the research mentoring program running. We have mentees signed up, and we will be mentoring them throughout this year and to meet their research goals. Learning Design collaborative open education resources is something that's our another initiative that we will be advertising through ASCII newsletter soon. This initiative is from the feedback that we received that our community wants to be learning to write, publish, without going through those complicated research, as well as for ethics and publications and so on and so forth. So this is going to be like 500 to 800 words of best practices, and we will be collecting it through themes, and more information in detail will be made available through ASCII newsletter as well as with this LinkedIn group. We will also be running, we were running hackathons, which is hands-on design issue that we sit together like on Zoom and solve, or try to solve at least. So there is a scenario where you work through your the real life university design issue or problem. We will also, so we had 2 of them a couple of years ago, but this year we are thinking of running 1 face-to-face or hybrid half day. So it will be a little bit longer, and people can join in hybrid mode, and that information will be shared through the ASCII newsletter as well. We will also have some community building program that we will be sharing with you. ASCII 2025 conference is going to be in Adelaide this year between 30th of November and 3rd December, which is fully hybrid. So please stay tuned and for call for papers. Today, we have very special speaker who is master in scholarship of learning and teaching. Sorry, was there any question?
No, I think someone's microphone was just unmuted.
So Lynette is an award-winning educator and researcher in the field of academic language literacy, research skill, and research methodologies. She has experience in teaching undergraduate, postgraduate, and graduate research students, including supervising PhD students. Lynette is an author of multiple journal articles and 2 academic books focused on experienced graduate research students in academia. She has qualifications in medicine, science, education, as well as counseling, and her research interests include doctoral students, academic integrity, students' well-being, AI literacy, and autoethnography. I think we should have like a complete separate session on autoethnography somewhere else, Lynette. Lynette is a senior fellow of HEA and an international honor awarded to educators who demonstrate through a thorough understanding of and strong commitment to teaching and learning. So welcome, Lynette. And before we start, I give a couple of minutes to Colin Simpson, who is lead of TelAdvisors Group, to talk about forthcoming TelAdvisor.
Thank you, Kashmir. I thought we were going to do this at the end. Hello, everyone. So we are kind of a sister organization, I suppose, to the Learning Design SIG. TelAdvisors Network, if you're not familiar with us, we aim to represent people in third space roles such as learning designers, academic developers, education technologists. We've got our first website, our first webinar kicking off next week on the 27th of March, which will be at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. And it will be about working in the higher education third space. So this is going to draw from, there was a bunch of papers published in a special issue of the Journal of Learning Development and Higher Education. I assume you've probably seen them. Kashmira and Kate were among the authors of these, as well as Meredith Hines and Alex, someone I don't know. So Meredith and Kashmira will be discussing their one first, a narrative account of third space technology enhanced learning and teaching roles working in higher education. Perfectly fitting. And then we'll also have Yvonne Irwin from the University of Melbourne talking about institutional responsibility in third space professionals, a call for structural change to embrace ambiguity. And I think there's a lot of overlap between these two. Did you want to add anything to that, Kashmir?
No, I think we will just keep it to that until the... So I have shared the link, Justin.
Thank you.
So over to you, Lynette.
Great, thank you. So I'm just going to share my slides here and make sure I can see the chat there. So hi, everyone. I am Lynette. I'm a lecturer at the Faculty of Education at Monash University. And until about 2 years ago, I was a third space professional. I am now a lecturer, but for many years, I worked as a learning skills advisor and student support roles in my work at Monash University. So my contact details are on the slide there. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about how you can do research on your teaching practice and how these can be published and can be used as evidence for awards and promotion applications and so forth. As Kashmira did, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I'm coming to you from. So I'm coming to you from the lands of the Bunurong people, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and also acknowledge any traditional owners who may be with us here today. So I'm going to start by talking about what scholarship of teaching and learning actually is, and then how it is relevant to your practice. Then some strategies for how you can start conducting research on your practice, gather evidence, and then how to disseminate your research and the different ways and avenues that you can do that. And then the last part of the session, we'll talk about how you can use that scholarship of teaching and learning as evidence for various teaching awards and promotion applications and the like. So firstly, what is scholarship of teaching and learning, or SOTL? So this is basically a systematic investigation of teaching to enhance student learning. So you are doing some reflective and evidence-based work to assess the learning that is happening, the way in which you are teaching, etc., to find a way to make learning better for students. And so it is very specifically focused on the practice within the learning space. So be this the classroom, the Zoom room, whatever. It is not a discipline research. It is specifically focused on making that learning in the learning space more effective. So as I talk a little bit about how you do that, I'd like you to think a bit, have you actually ever reflected on your teaching in a very systematic and structured way? Have you started putting in place some strategies where you can keep records of things, of your reflections on things that worked well, things that didn't work well, and so on? Which things can you start to reflect on now that could be helpful for you in the future? So why should you really do SOTL, and what's the purpose of it, right? So it is a reflective practice. It is a way in which you can synthesize knowledge with personal experience so that you can therefore better understand the learning that's happened in the classroom or hasn't happened in the classroom, and from that make sense of the problems and improve the learning experience. So to do this takes your textbook knowledge about your specific third space knowledge that you use. You combine this with your personal experience, which often is, many years of knowledge and experience in your field. And you take this and you combine this with literature that has been done on learning and teaching. And then you synthesize this together. And often this also involves the synthesis of your personal experiences and emotions as a way to make the work connect with others as well. So SOTL enhances teaching quality and student learning. So it has a dual focus. It focuses on you as the teacher, as the person who is helping develop new learning resources, for example. How can you do that better? But also it enhances the learning of the person who uses a said new exciting resource, right? So it has that dual focus, and it is therefore a way in which you are continuously improving your professional practice. But at the same time, you can share that with others so that they too can improve their professional practice. It is also a way to evidence that you've contributed to some sort of disciplinary knowledge for the institution, because as we all know, publications count greatly for the research metrics at most universities. So by being able to publish these things, you can contribute to that as well. So in other words, SOTL bridges that very academic research that some people do with the professional space that most of you are working in, to find this middle ground where you can make the professional space that you're working in better. It also is a way to enhance not just the quality of your work, but also to enhance the credibility of your work. Because I know when I was working as a learning skills advisor, quite often you get the lecturers who sort of assume they know more about a topic than you do just because they're the lecturer and you're the learning advisor. But actually, I've been working in the space for more than a decade. Obviously, I know a lot of these things. And if I can say, well, here's this wonderful paper that I published that shows this thing I want to teach you, then that enhances credibility that you actually know what you are talking about. It is also a way to enhance to align with the institutional priorities, because like I said before, research metrics are the things that really count most of the time for those high-end decision makers in the university. A lot of the time it is the number of papers, the number of citations you get that shows them the quality of your work. So there are many examples of SOTL that I can talk about. If you're interested in seeing some different versions, you can go and look me up on Google Scholar. There's many there. I would like to encourage you, as you start to think about how you can do research on your practice, focusing on a particular research project. So comes up with some sort of theme. So you'll see in my work, I currently have 3 major research projects that I am working on. And all my research that I do funnels into these 3 spaces so that I can, one, have a nice portfolio of things, but also so that I can upskill my knowledge on the pedagogical practices in that one very specific space, and therefore make my work more efficient and also more impactful. So the examples that I'm going to show you, the 2 most recent ones that I've got on the screen there that I did, the one was using my, so what I did is I've been working in the AI space since it came along, and I took my own experiences of using AI in the classroom in these sort of different ways, and how students learned and what I learned and all these things. And I worked with a colleague of mine, and he did the same thing. And then we put it together, and through our experiences, we actually developed a framework of AI literacy, which is now already used all over the place and has actually been turned into an open access AI curriculum that's globally used. So this is an example of a really impactful piece of scholarship of teaching and learning, because I took my experience, my colleague took his experience. We actually purposely analyzed what we learned, how we learned that, what that means for others, and synthesized it together to come up with some sort of usable thing that other people can use. The one on the right there is something that one of my PhD students recently published, which was on a classroom space where he taught English to speakers of other languages and got anonymous feedback, and then used that anonymous feedback to assess the capacity of and the skills that he uses as his teaching methodology, and then see what that shows about how the students engaged in the classroom or didn't engage in the classroom, thereby making the engagement practices in a TESOL classroom better. So this is another example of the types of things you can do. You can use a feedback you get from students to make your practices better. You can take your own experiences and systematically analyze them and use that to help others improve their work. So what you need to do is you need to come up with the topic. So these slides are the slides I often use when I show people how to come up with a research question. So one of the first things you need to do is actually focus your topic. What is it that you're interested in investigating in your space? So often this comes from a problem that you have identified in your particular environment. So you tried to do something, it didn't work, or you did something and it kind of worked, but there's still problems and you're trying to figure out how to make it better. Or actually the thing you were doing was really great, but the students didn't like it or whatever. There's all sorts of different problems that occur in a learning setting, right? So often your interest comes from that problem that you've identified, things that motivate you that you want to fix. So think about that. What is these problems in your specific space? What experiences have you had over the many years of your practice that makes you want to work on this topic? But also, why would this topic matter to anyone else? This will help you then focus to start to develop some research questions. Now, in terms of examples, I'm going to show you a couple of examples of this. So this is an example of a research project that I did with my PhD students. And what we did is we examined our own practices of using generative AI and how that helped or didn't help us in our learning in an academic environment. So we took our personal experiences, we took all of them together and synthesize the learning from each of them, what worked, what didn't work, what can other people take from this, And then therefore, what contribution can we make to the space of generative AI in higher education, which is, of course, a very, very popular space at the moment. And so the question we actually ended up asking, you'll see there in blues, how do our experiences with generative AI influence our navigation of academic and social spaces? So this is where we started. So have a clear and specific question that where you are starting. But try not to make that question so specific that answer is either just like yes or no. You want a question that's specific enough, but still big enough that you can actually do a proper research project on it. So I often encourage people to think of what the Turabian manual suggests. So I am working on this topic because I want to find out something so that I can help others understand something. So if you've got this problem in your practice that you want to work on, what do you want to find out about it? And what then would that mean for others? So as an example, this is one of my projects. I'm working on the experiences of PhD students as they study because I want to find out how they develop their identities as scholars so that I can help others understand how to improve PhD programs. So this is one of my big areas of interest is I want to make the doctoral space better. And so all the projects related to that bigger project focus on how can I make the doctoral pedagogical space better. And then I take the experiences of the things that I teach, because I teach extensively into the PhD program, take the experiences of how the students learn, synthesize those things together to develop a way to improve pedagogical practice. So your question that you need to come up with needs to be clear and focused, so narrow enough to answer, but at the same time open-ended enough so that it has potentially multiple answers. So you don't know what your participants are going to say. For example, if you're going to interview your students, you don't know what they're going to say. You want to make sure that it is open-ended enough that it would be able to give you multiple answers. So, for example, why are people sad is a very not good research question because it is so big. It is not possible to really actually answer this question. The second one there is not actually a bad question, but the answer is either yes or no. And it's pretty hard to write a whole paper where the answer is just yes or no, right? So the third one is an example of a good question because it is something that is researchable. What you could do is you could, interview parents before and after the lockdowns and assess their trust in teachers' professionalism from that. So you're looking for this sort of question. Normally, we recommend 3 layers in your question. So in this case, lockdowns, parents, and trust in teachers' professionalism. That's the 3 layers. That's usually sufficient to have a narrow enough question that you can start to do that research. Then you need to think of your methodology. So there are many different methodologies, and I'm not going to be able to tell you which one is the best for you. Realistically, though, it is likely that some form of action research would be the one that most of you would tend to do. That is, problem in the learning space, put in some sort of intervention, assess whether that intervention works, and then write about it, maybe improve the intervention again and go through these cycles. Whichever methodology you choose, though, you will need to be able to explain in your paper. So you will need to upskill yourself in some of those research things. So these are the most common research methodologies that are used. In my case, I tend to use quite a lot of autoethnography, but I have also done case study, action research, grounded theory and narrative inquiry, and some survey research. So it depends really on what is the most appropriate for the particular topic that you would like to investigate. So on the website link that's there, I actually give like a little tiny explanation of what the purpose of each of these are. So you can go and assess which one you think would work best for your particular thing that you want to investigate. And similarly, that's also true for the data collection methods. So there are so many different pieces of data that you could use depending on what you want. For example, if you're investigating your own practices, one of the most obvious things that you could do would be like collect artifacts of your lesson plans or your learning design task that you developed, for example. You could collect reflections on your experience. You could write some diary entries. You could interview yourself on Zoom and, ask yourself some questions like, why did I do this, and all that sort of thing. You could theoretically observe your recorded Zoom class that you did once and see what that shows about how you teach in the classroom. Like, there's so many different things that you could do. What you need to think about is which pieces of data will be able to give me the answers to the question I have. So you have a problem, you've developed some sort of research question. Now you need to design a method that'll give you the data to answer that question. And it's not like one piece of data collection or one type of method is the best. It is whatever is best for your particular purpose. And then in your paper, you would explain why you chose that particular method to collect the data, to analyze your data, and so on. So this is a very basic way of reflecting that works very well in all sorts of settings. It is called a minimalistic form of reflection. What, so what, now what? And you'll see I've given some additional questions on the side there that can prompt you. So to describe the experience, what actually happened, what did you do, etc. To analyze the experience, and then to create some sort of step-by-step plan of what happens next. At the top corner there, I have a screenshot of me talking to myself, interviewing myself using these exact questions. So that was for one of my papers that is how I collected my data. I interviewed myself on Zoom, asking myself these questions. It was like a 45-minute discussion with myself, which I then transcribed and analyzed for the particular purpose that I was investigating. So there are all sorts of things that you can do if you're a little bit brave, a bit creative. You can find all sorts of ways to actually purposely explore that problem that you are experiencing in the space that you are in. And then there's also many data analysis methods. It is most likely that what you would do is, if you were doing surveys, you do some sort of basic statistical analysis. Many computer programs can do that for you. Or you'll be doing some sort of thematic analysis for the qualitative data. But you may be doing some document analysis because you want to assess your curriculum design, for example. And I suppose you could do visual analysis if you do some sort of, online learning design course that you've developed and you would like to go and investigate the actual physical design of it. You could be doing some of that as well. Now, the one thing that is important to realize is that you need to do research ethically. So if you are researching only yourself, you don't actually need to apply for ethics because you're only researching yourself. But if any other person is involved in your research, you may need ethics. So, for example, that paper that I talked about, my experiences and my co-authors' experiences that we synthesized together, that did not require any ethics. But the other paper that I talked about, where my student analyzed his own practice but used the anonymous feedback from the students, because that feedback came from someone else, required ethics. So the things to consider for ethics is who's involved and how can you go about making sure that there are no harms for them. So the four things on the screen are the foundation of ethics: do good, which is beneficence; do no harm, which is non-maleficence; respect your participants' autonomy and the capacity to choose whether or not they want to be part of your study; and always be fair and just. Make sure equal opportunity, those sorts of things. So if, for example, you're going to do a teaching activity and then you're going to survey your students that were in the classroom and you're going to use that data to do your research, that data comes from somewhere else. So you would need to apply for ethics and you'd need to explain to the participants how this will be used, and they need to have the capacity to say, I don't want to fill in your survey because I don't want you to use my data, or why, yes, I'm happy to fill in your survey. Let's continue on. That's the basic premise. And the ethics applications, usually most universities have ethics boards there. So you just go through the system. At Monash, for example, we have a very robust online system where you literally log in and you start. It says start here. And you click on the button and you just follow the steps one at a time, answering the questions as new questions appear so that you can answer all the things that the ethics board requires. They may come back and say, oh, we need some more things, or they'd say, yes, off you go. You're ready to do your data collection. So once you've collected and analyzed the data, you need to do something with it. There is no point in doing research if you don't tell others what you found. It is actually one of the founding principles of many of the research codes of conduct, in that you need to be able to share your knowledge. This is with other professionals and the wider field, maybe with society, however, whatever it is that you're sharing. The idea is to extend knowledge. And so by sharing your work, others can learn from your experience. It also creates a space where you can develop disciplinary communities. Maybe, this space of third space professionals can learn a lot from your studies, so you can share your work at one of the webinars. That's an example of sharing your work. Or maybe you decide to write a real academic paper and publish it in a fancy journal. Then you can share your work that way. So what you need to think about is actually, who is it that you would like to tell about the things that you have discovered? And then what would be the best platform for you to share that? That may be an academic paper, but it also may be something entirely different. So think about these things and be able to justify why you think that is the best for the particular thing that you've done your research on. So think about, where do others in your field publish their results? If you are doing reading on your topic to develop your understanding of the background, where are those things published? They may be published just by communicating with your fellow colleagues. Just, having a nice chat over coffee and you've learned something and they send you some interesting stuff. You may have a blog. People read blogs quite often. They're actually surprisingly popular. And so you may be able to share your work on your blog, and it will be picked up all over the place by all sorts of people who want to know about the thing that you did. You can share your work on social media. You've already got a LinkedIn page for this group. Maybe you have Blue Sky, or you use X or whatever you can use to share your work so that others can find it. Maybe you want to write a newspaper article. An article in The Conversation or something that you can share with the wider society about this really important insight that you've discovered. You can, of course, present at conferences. I know you've got a conference coming up at the end of the year, so that seems like a good place to go. This is a great way to share with others in your specific field. Maybe you want to publish in a professional magazine, so not like a fancy academic journal, but more a practice-based journal where the people who would actually use the stuff actually would read it. Or you can go publish it in one of those fancy academic books or journal articles. All of these are valued and could be useful depending on what it is that you've done and who you would like to know more about it. The one thing to be aware of, it is particularly important if you've not really got lots of experience with publishing, is be aware of the predatory publishers. They do exist and they will find you. And what they'll do is they'll say, oh, I read your work. It's so interesting. Publish it in my journal. It'll only cost you $5,000. And you're like, oh, well, that sounds like a cool journal. And then they take your money. They may not publish it at all. Or they publish it, but the journal is actually such a dodgy journal, no one will ever read it. And then you can't use it because you've already published it. You can't go and publish it somewhere else. So you lose the capacity. So always use, if you are going to go for academic journals and books, always use reputable ones. Not just like, anyone who emails you. Realistically, if some random person just emails you and says, send your paper to our journal, it is probably a predatory publisher and you should just ignore them. Don't even respond. So journal articles, this is an example of me just literally saying like, oh, this is what I did. It is literally half this paper is me just telling you about a learning task that I did and what I learned from that. And so this is a journal article. It was published in 2023, I think. Yes. Journal articles are very well read. They are considered the peak of academic publishing. So if you can publish something in a really fancy journal, then that always looks good on your CV, right? There are some things to consider though. Firstly, you need to find a journal that actually suits the thing that you're talking about. It needs to fit the aim and scope. Otherwise, they'll just desk reject it. So what you can do is you can look at the aims and scope on the website. You can also look at the editorial board, who's on this journal. If they are people you frequently use in your work, that probably indicates that it is a field that's relevant to you. The other thing that's important to think of is how long it's going to take to get published. So journal publishing can take a really long time. One, because it is just long time to go through peer review. But secondly, it also has wait time for some journals. If they don't publish the article online ahead of print, you kind of have to wait until the physical copy comes around. And sometimes that can be up to a year that you're waiting. Some journals, like the one in the chat there, only have a 4% acceptance rate. So these sorts of things are often also published on the website, so you can see what you're letting yourself in for if you're going to submit to that journal. The other thing to consider is how much can you make it available. So if you can make it available open access, that is better. You will get more people reading it, more people citing it. It would be good for you. But open access usually costs money. Someone has to pay. So at my institution, I'm very lucky. We have agreements with many of the big publishers. So the university will pay many of the publishing fees. So when I decide where to send my article to, I always check whether that journal is on our list of journals that the university will pay for, so that I can make my work available open access. Because some of the publication costs are ridiculous. The Taylor and Francis ones, for example, where I publish quite often, $4,500 US. Like, that's a ridiculous amount of money. Who has that sort of just lying around in their back pocket, right? So you want to make sure that where you are, if you have support from the university, that you are able to make it available open access. If not, I would suggest it may be better just to publish it behind the paywall, because most academic people who would be reading it would have access to it through their library institutional access. Then you've got books and book chapters. So you can write like a whole book. Writing a whole book is a lot of work, but certainly is very well regarded if you can do that. You can also create chapters in a book. So, or you can be an editor for an edited book. So the examples on the screen there are the two books that I've edited and one of the chapters that's in the book. So these are very widely read. They are printed in physical copies and online, so you get great exposure. I think the book on the left, I checked yesterday, and it has 42,000 accesses. So, I mean, it's well read. But books take a long time to publish, probably sometimes twice as long as a journal article. And there are different publishers, and not all publishers are considered good academic publishers. So realistically, if you're going to publish one of these things, you'd probably go with Springer, Routledge, or Sage, if you want to, have it well regarded by the academic people. One thing that people are not aware of is that you can actually preprint your work. Most academic journals allow this, so you can publish a early version of your paper on a preprint server. So our institution actually has one, but there are many that you can access. For example, the most well-known one is AXRIV. But there are many others. And so what this means is that it becomes immediately available for everyone to read. So you'll remember my AI framework one that I talked about before. We made it available on preprint. You can see it here. You will see that when I took this screenshot, it had already been viewed 5,000 times. And it's already been cited 4 times. So this is early feedback on your work, immediately available for others. They are citable. They get indexed in things like Google Scholar and so on. But that does have an implication for peer review, because it is possible that your reviewer would then know who you are because they can find your paper on the preprint server. But this is another way to get around that open access cost, because people can read the previous version of your paper in the open access space, even if you've published something behind a paywall. And I basically now preprint everything that I publish. It's so far been really successful for me. Conferences, like the person in the chat suggested there, are a great way to go. You can get feedback on work. Conference papers are sometimes published as proceedings of the conference. So the one on the top right is an example of that. This is freely available. People cite it. It's indexed in all the databases. So it is an example of a publication, but it is a conference paper. Additionally, some conferences also then create special issues of journals for the really good conference papers. And so those then get published in an actual academic journal, which is what the one at the bottom is an example of. So it can also be a way to get into a journal from the conference presentation that you did. The other thing that's important to do is don't just publish your paper and hope people read it. You do need to find a way to increase the impact of your work. And it's important to find the way that works best for you. So for me, I use social media, my blog and my YouTube channel, because this is where most people find me. So my YouTube channel has over 10,000 subscribers. So it's a really obvious and easy way to share my research, because if I make my little video, it gets automatically sent to 10,000 people. Right? Great way to promote my work. My blog is also quite well read. I'm not, a Kardashian, so it's not like my social media has millions of followers, but people who work in my field follow me. So that's a great way for me to share my work with others who have similar interests. So the thing you also want to consider is how you write it. Those different places have different tones and styles. So if you're going to be writing a very academic article, it's going to be very different to that blog post that you're going to write. So you need to know how you can structure a compelling narrative of your story for the audience that you are working for. And it is useful to use visuals and storytelling regardless of the platform you go to. You can write academic papers in very storytelling-y visual ways that often get much more engagement than that boring academic paper that is just lots of long sentences and fancy words. So think about how you can communicate your findings most effectively. So then also think about what you can do with those things to improve your own profile. So the awards on the side there are some of the awards that I got that I used my scholarship or teaching for to showcase why I should get this award. So for example, the award for teaching excellence, the idea is to say, well, I'm a great teacher. Here's some evidence that I am a great teacher, right? How did I do that? Well, I took some of my papers on writing groups that I developed and assessed and showed that they have all these wonderful benefits as evidence of me doing good teaching, designing good learning environments, evaluating my practice. All of these things are frequently required for an award application. And these award applications are supposed to be written in the very reflective, I'm thinking of my own practice and making myself better, right? So it's using that scholarship that you did on how you made your teaching better is a really great way to be able to demonstrate that to those very award committees. This is the same if you were intending to apply for promotion, if you are intending to convert your role from a professional to an academic staff member. That is how my role got converted because of my scholarship of teaching and learning. I got converted from a professional staff member to an education-focused academic. So using these can be evidence to help you achieve those goals. Additionally, one thing that is really important for those things is that you do need to develop a teaching philosophy. And this is actually something that's quite hard to write. Like, what kind of teacher do I want to be, right? But it needs to be situated within research practice that showcases that you actually understand teaching pedagogy. So this is the one that I use for my teaching philosophy. Usually it's written in this third person tone, which is kind of weird to write about yourself. But you have to think about, okay, so usually we suggest three core elements of your teaching that makes your teaching your type of teaching. So in my case, a lot of things that I do embed that learning through experience or reflecting on your learning and learning from the reflective practice or learning together. So this is what I ended up saying are the three core foundations of my teaching philosophy, and then I explained that. And then you will see then my learning environments therefore are like this. So the idea is to be able to explore, why you teach the way you do. Often award and promotion application require you to explain this and then use evidence from your classroom practices to support that this is the type of teacher that you are. And then make sure that when you are writing those applications, you align to the award or the fellowship or whatever frameworks that they've given you. So this one that I've pulled out here is from my application for Senior Fellow of HEA. And they have a very specific framework, the Professional Standards Framework, I think it's called, with all sorts of elements. And we had to align it with the different elements. So that's what that A5, K5 things are that are appearing in the brackets. I am aligning the stuff that I did with the framework that they require so that I can demonstrate that I meet all the criteria for the award, the fellowship, or whatever it is. I will agree with the person in the chat there. When you do the fellowship or the senior fellowship applications, they require you to do all those things, like develop the philosophy, do all of this reflection and things. And I have used those things in so many other things afterwards. You can just copy and paste little parts of it as evidence for your thing. I've reused it for my portfolio all the time. So totally agree that that is a really worthwhile thing. I applied for the senior fellow because, like I said before, when I was working in that third space, a lot of the time people thought that I didn't really know what I was doing. Like, even though I have the title of doctor in front of my name, PhD and lots of letters after my name, it seemed like people still assumed I knew less than they did. So I decided I purposely wanted to apply for this so that I could say, see, I really do know what I'm talking about. And I have since used that document for all sorts of purposes because of the things that they require you to do to be able to get that award. So the other thing to do is build a portfolio. So portfolios can be those publications, but also the presentations. So I'm giving you a presentation now. This is something that would go in my line as an example of an invited presentation I did on scholarship of teaching and learning. And you'll see this is just literally a screenshot from my CV where I listed all the things that I've recently done in the last apparently 3 years that you can see on the screen there of these keynotes or invited presentations that are relevant. So you should do that. What I do is actually I use my CV as a continuous mapping tool. And so I have spent, when you do the fellowship application, you actually have to submit an education-focused CV with it. So at that point in time, I spent a lot of time redesigning it and organizing it into all those different elements that you're supposed to be doing. And so now every year I'm like, okay, I need to add something to each of these things. So I use it as a planning document. And when I submit an abstract for a conference, when I am writing a paper or whatever, I will add a little line in it, and I will make it like green if I've submitted it and I'm waiting. I'll make it orange if it's like in process and it's going to happen soon. Or it's red if it's just like some idea in my head that I think I may do this year, but I haven't quite figured out how yet. And so I use it as a continuously improving document to help me build this portfolio, because otherwise it's really easy to lose track of what you're doing. You can see all the presentations I've done in 2025 so far. It's only March. If I don't keep track of this and I then later want to apply for promotion, I have to go back through my calendar and look for all the little entries and add it in. It's a waste of time. Keep the portfolio, build it, continuously try and expand each part of it so that you have as much evidence as possible to show them, here is all my practice. This is why I am the best candidate for the thing that you are applying for. It's also a great way to link your work and map your career. If you know where you want to go, know which things you need as evidence. So if you want to move into that, academic role, the things you need as evidence are publications, grant money, conference and invited presentations. So that would be the things that you would focus on so that you can build that capacity. So as an example, I'll just show you, this is that YouTube channel that I mentioned, and you will see, if I get my little pencil here, I've got this playlist of my research. So I quite literally share my very fancy academic papers as videos. But all the other videos that are in here are actually also evidence of me sharing my teaching practice. I've developed little tiny videos for all the things that I know the students frequently ask me. And I get the same email over and over. I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to make a little video where they can go and find the answer. That is me developing an online educational resource. So this is an example of me putting my practice into a public place and sharing it with the wider society, which is why at the end of my CV, there is a list of 101 videos that are my public scholarship, because that is actually what I've done. I've taken my practical teaching things and turned it into publicly available resources for other people to use. So think a bit creatively about what it is you're doing and what can be evidence for what you are contributing to your specific field. So now we have some time for questions, so I'll stop sharing. Any questions or comments?
Brilliant. Thank you, Lynette. So I just want to introduce Kate Michelle, who you continuously looking in the chat. She also is Learning Design SIG lead, and also Leanne, she's here as well. So I will just hand over to Leanne and Kate for the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Lynette. You gave such a broad and simple practical advice, with this growing interest in third space individuals, and obviously exemplified by the amount of people that are here as well. But there's a lot of interest. I'm keen to open it to the floor. We've got a few minutes left for questions. I'm just looking at the chat area as well. Whilst others are adding their questions to the chat, I'm kind of curious, just with everything that you've provided, what's one small step a third space professional could take tomorrow to start engaging with SOTL? What's one small step?
I think that reflecting on your practice is the one small step. It's not that hard. It's a little bit weird to actually say, like, today I did this and I felt like this and I learned that, right? It's kind of bit, feels a bit self-indulgent maybe, but it is something that is easy to do. I have a research journal that is on Google Docs. I have a little link. Anywhere I am, I can just click on the little link and I can just type in some stuff about what happened on this day that is somewhat related to research. And this includes all my feelings and things. And I can then go back and refer to that and track where my thinking went and why I did what I did. And if you do that, you develop that portfolio of data, which you can then do something with.
Fantastic. Absolutely agree with that, having that curation and evidence. Now, we had a question by Naomi just in the chat area. If you just have a look, did your university support you with research when you were in a professional role? I think
that's a great question.
And did you have time to complete it on your own?
Yeah, so when I was working in
struggling with in my role.
Yeah, it's a great question. When I was working
in professional.
In the library, when I was a learning skills advisor, no, I did that on my own time just because I was interested in research. They didn't have much of an issue with conference presentations, but they just couldn't really see the point of papers. So I just wrote them on my own. When I moved to it was a really weird third space role in the faculty, which was kind of learning support and teaching, but still a professional role. They are more keen on that, mostly I think because it's faculty metrics. But in the library, no, I just advocated for it for myself.
Thanks.
That's a really interesting question that I never had a problem with the ethics board not accepting ethical applications from professional staff. That's quite an interesting thing. I guess what you could do is you could team up with one of the academic staff that you are developing a learning resource for and get them to initiate the application. And then work together. I have a few papers that I wrote when I was in the library where I was one of the authors and two of the academic staff that we worked together to like redesign the unit, for example, are the other authors on the paper. So that could possibly be a way you could go.
Sorry, I'm going to also add a point, and hopefully it's not drowned out by the construction work behind me. But I guess just it's a good point to bring up the mentorship group that the SIG is organising, which I'll pass over to Leanne and Kashmira, but because I know we've got limited time. But you know, one way could be like using those reflections and then doing an autoethnographic piece that doesn't require ethics, or teaming up with like-minded individuals through, say, like the mentorship group that the SIG's running, or through other groups that are maybe happening, say the Escalate CMP, where the other thing that I sometimes do is also look at like what are the like technical boundaries that you can cross. So research isn't supported, but how can I do reading that contributes to so I can be strategic there. So that's sometimes what I do. But yeah, the ethics bit, or like just having to do it in your own time, like they're all kind of really tough considerations, but that's yeah.
I'll put the link in the chat there. That's an example of that self-study autoethnography that we did, myself and my colleague. That's an example of that type of work that you can do that doesn't require ethics but can still be published. I've shared the open access version, so everyone should have access. Justin, you seem to have a question?
Thanks, Lynette. Look, I popped something in the chat, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing that, because you made something which was incredibly overwhelming seem quite achievable, and you've given some great steps and strategies and processes to follow through that. And as I said in my comment, I've been involved in some things that I've contributed to, and then as soon as I started talking research, it was just, I didn't know enough about it. So you've explained some key things really well, which has filled a big gap. So thank you.
You're welcome. And I will say it's a process, right? So like the first scholarship of teaching and learning thing that I published was in 2013. And I think in 2013, I published only the one thing. Last year, I was oddly successful, and I published 7 papers last year. So, you learn bit by bit, step by step, you build that portfolio and become more confident in those skills.
Okay. Look, we have such great discussions, great presentation. I'm seeing the comments, a lot of thank yous as well, and praise. I would like to thank you, Lynette, as well, so much for this presentation. I know it's been very helpful for many people in our audience as well. Our Learning Design SIG is running a research mentor program for third space professionals as well, supporting them this year. We're hoping that it will be a great success and it will continue to grow for next year as well, but certainly a very important topic, and with a lot of great interest. Thank you so much, Lynette.
Thanks everyone for coming.